I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics, messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for September the 11th, 2025. If you entered into this day very upset, somewhat surreal, somewhat on edge, somewhat disoriented, you would not be alone. Of course, today is the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks in New York City and at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. I would assume that many of you went back in the past, you took a stroll down memory lane, and you remembered where you were when you heard about the attacks in New York and Washington. For myself, I remember how it was around 9 o'clock, 9:30. I was in British politics class at the University of Oklahoma. Students were, gathering for class. Somebody came in and said a plane had just hit the World Trade Center. And of course, a lot of us were thinking about, some kind of really small Cessna type plane. But no, they were civilian aircraft. And then later we talked to our professor, Dr. Larry Hill, about, what's going to come of this. This is British politics class. How would this possibly affect the United Kingdom? And of course, what we all kind of concluded was that throughout the course of the day, we would be getting more and more information. After British politics class, so this would have been around 11 toward 11:30, all classes at OU actually got canceled. And then there were different screens, television screens set up in the student union as well as in the cinema, the little theater that they had where there was a large screen and they had multiple news playing. Definitely was thinking about that this morning. But the big news story, of course, if you have not heard it already, if you haven't, I'd be really surprised, was yesterday's assassination of Charlie Kirk. And what Charlie Kirk did through his organization, Turning Point, the influence that he had on the conservative movement here in the United States. He was a steadfast supporter of Israel and the Jewish people. He was a deep intellectual. He was fair-minded. You didn't have to agree with everything he stood for to recognize that he was someone to be reckoned with. And I remember yesterday, after we concluded our episode for Messianic Insider, and then, of course, there's some post-production, which that involves sending out the update, archiving it on our website, that sort of thing. I remember here in my office going and sitting in another chair, a chair I usually sit into, read, pray, journal. And then all of a sudden, I just felt this sharp pain in my chest and in my head here. And I'm like, what's going on? I know it's the month of September now in the state of Texas. I do get barometric pressure headaches. So if barometric pressure goes up or down, I'll get a headache, really right here. Well, in the spirit, like so many people, I was feeling what had taken place. And indeed, right now, that is an event which is dominating the airwaves. There's very little else in news other than that. But right now, as people sort through what took place yesterday with Charlie Kirk's death, there's going to be a period of mourning, remembering him, remembering the the legacy that he left. Indeed, on our Messianic Insider news roundup, we've definitely referred to his different social media posts and perspectives. There's going to be, from the legal standpoint, an investigation of what took place. And we're really not going to be covering that now. I think it's a little too soon. But, who did this? Why did they do it? What were the factors involved? But then the long-term aspect, and this is going to be what I think affects us the most. What will be the social ramifications of this? How big an event was Charlie Kirk's assassination? Is it on the level of a Martin Luther King Jr.? Those are the kinds of things which will take a while to evaluate and consider. So yeah, I think a lot of us, we're all shaken up over this. We're all very upset. You don't have to be a conservative. You can be someone on the left who recognizes that this was something which was heinous, which took place. And you can recognize that, this is, a pivotal moment, a pivotal change in our society. Today, this morning, as I was, sorting through, I did not have an easy day yesterday afternoon. When I finally got word that he had passed away, I was actually leaving the supermarket, our local HEB, and then it was just like, yeah, I mean, you all have seen the video. You don't survive that kind of a hit. But yeah, this is something which I know is very upsetting. What are going to be some of the long-term social ramifications? This morning, I just got in the spirit that, an act of free will was committed, and there are going to be a lot of people who make choices in their lives. There are going to be a lot of people affected by this moving ahead. And, how does this affect the Messianic community? I mean, obviously, we have lost a major advocate of Israel and the Jewish people. We've lost somebody who was seen to raise awareness for many uncomfortable matters and changes taking place in the world. But along with that, what are going to be some of the things which are affected in terms of our safety, in terms of people who are influencers, in person, online? How is this going to affect different features of security? So we'll continue to wait and we'll continue to see. But as I have said many times, in these very perilous and unknown days in which we're living, as redeemed, born-again believers, we have access to the infinite power of heaven. We have access to legions of angels. We have every day the opportunity to pray when we wake up, Lord, protect me, protect my family, protect my community, protect people I care about. And we don't often make use of it. Hopefully, more people will be crying out to the Lord, protect us, Lord, and show us the way to move forward. Over the past several days, what have we seen in the news cycle? Israel attacking Hamas leadership in Qatar. So we've had a Middle East issue. Yesterday, we talked about Russian drones entering into Polish airspace, a Russia-Ukraine issue, and of course, today we're reflecting on the death of Charlie Kirk, an American homeland issue. So, yeah, there's a lot to pray about, and you can feel the tension in the air right now. These kinds of things tend to be those matters which affect a great many people, and this will especially affect many of Generation Z. All right, so that's just some of my observations I wanted to make before we got started. I know that we're going to be all sorting through this in the coming days. We're all, distraught and what have you. Let's start out with our theology roundup, and this is what we had planned to do earlier. And we're going to discuss the epistle to the Colossians a little bit. We have had some teachings recently on both Colossians and Ephesians. Colossians and Ephesians are believed to have been written about the same time. There's a lot of overlap in the content. Some think that Ephesians was written first, and then Colossians is kind of a compressed version of Ephesians. Others think that Colossians was written first, and that Ephesians is an expanded version of Colossians. More tend to believe that. So we're going to be covering composition of Colossians today, and then later on we'll be discussing Ephesians. Okay, so our study is taken from our ministry workbook, a survey of the Holy Scriptures for the Practical Messianic. Many of you have seen this. It's available in both paperback as well as ebook for Amazon Kindle. Surveying the Holy Scriptures is one of the most important things you can ever do in your life. This text, this resource was released in 2024, combining our two previous books, Survey of the Tanakh and Survey of the Apostolic Scriptures. So it effectively works as an introduction to the Bible workbook. And it does not shy away from some of the composition controversies, how different things have been interpreted or approached in the critical tradition among more liberal theologians and examiners. And some of this actually does affect Colossians. All right, so let me switch screens really quickly and we'll get into Colossians. Excellent. Okay, there we go. So if you're using this workbook yourself, this is intended for personal or group study, where one of the first things you do is read through the Epistle of Paul to the Colossians, and it's only 4 chapters, so reading it in a single sitting is not impossible. Keeping a journal log of people, places, key themes and events, and major scripture passages. As I have said, surveying the Bible for yourself, having a notebook where you jot down people, places, key events, your questions, one of the most important things you'll ever do in your life. All right, so let's get into the theological summary of Colossians. That's really what we're here for today. The approximate date, 60 to 62 CE. The time period, a season of extreme error in parts of the body of Messiah during the first imprisonment of Paul. The author, the Apostle Paul. Location of author, Rome. Target audience and their location, Jewish and non-Jewish believers in Colossae. The letter to the Colossians is commonly classified among the prison epistles, also including Ephesians, Philippians, and Philemon. The author of Colossians was stated to not only have been Paul, Colossians 1:23, but readers see the closing attestation, I, Paul, write this greeting with my own hand. Colossians 4:18, New American Standard. The Pauline authorship of the epistle to the Colossians has not been significantly disputed by many conservatives, even though it is doubted by many liberals. Claims against Pauline authorship are usually offered on the basis of the themes witnessed in the letter and its vocabulary. It is important to be aware, however, that not all liberals are convinced that Pauline authorship of Colossians is something so impossible. It is also understandable that given the mention of Timothy as a co-sender of the letter, Colossians 1:1, that Timothy could have played some kind of a role in the letter's composition as Paul's amanuensis, his secretary. Specific terms appearing in Colossians which do not appear in the agreed-upon genuine Pauline letters may be the result of the false teaching which needed to be countered. Okay, we're going to take a short moment here and explain to you that for the record, as most people I know in the Messianic community would affirm, I would affirm genuine Pauline authorship of all of the attributed Pauline letters. That doesn't mean, for example, that someone like Timothy or Luke couldn't have played a role as a co-author or Paul's secretary. But I believe in genuine Pauline authorship. Among many liberals, those of the critical tradition, there are a series of letters which are commonly classified as being Deutero-Pauline, which means it's not believed that Paul wrote them. Instead, it's widely concluded that these were written a generation or two after the death of Paul to honor the Pauline legacy. And these Deutero-Pauline letters principally include Ephesians, Colossians, 2 Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, and Titus. So not everyone is agreed that Paul wrote those letters. And some of the claims against Pauline authorship include things like this wasn't an issue seen in the record of the other Pauline letters. There are terms which are used in these letters which don't appear in other Pauline letters. Those are some of the main conclusions which are drawn. And so we don't want to avoid the fact that not everyone agrees that Paul wrote Colossians. I believe Paul did write Colossians, but if you have a study Bible, like one of the study Bibles in the Oxford Annotated series, New Interpreter Study Bible, something from more the critical tradition or an ecumenical source, you're going to see that the study notes, the introductions and articles may not reflect the view that Paul wrote Colossians. Okay, but for the record, I believe Paul wrote Colossians. Okay, Colossians is unique because the biblical record does not attest that the Apostle Paul ever visited Colossae, yet there is a large amount of personal involvement in his letter. Paul was not personally, or at least directly acquainted with the Colossians. Paul did, however, know a great deal about the Colossian assembly through Epaphras, Colossians 1, 7 and 8, a dedicated servant who took the time to visit Paul during his imprisonment to inform him of the situation or situations which had arisen in Colossae. The city of Colossae was located in Asia Minor on the trading road between Ephesus and the Euphrates River. Apparently, the good news had been carried to Colossae by Epaphras, who was a native of the city, Colossians 4:12, during Paul's 3-year ministry tenure in Ephesus, Colossians 1, 7 and 8, Acts 19:10, and an assembly of believers had been established. Those who accept genuine Pauline authorship of Colossians consider the letter to have been written in the same general time frame of Ephesians and Philippians, likely between 60 to 62 CE from Paul's imprisonment in Rome. The actual composition of the epistle to the Colossians is tied to that of the epistle to Philemon, given the fact that the same people who extended greetings to the Colossians were the same ones who extended greetings to Philemon. Colossians 4, 10 through 14, Philemon 23 and 24. For this reason, many commentaries on Colossians are often paired with Philemon, including my own. The epistle to the Colossians and the epistle of Ephesians do have some kind of a relationship, given the considerable overlap in their contents, but there are debates as to which letter was written first. Was Colossians a condensed version of Ephesians, or was Ephesians an expanded version of Colossians? Many today opt for Colossians being written before Ephesians. Paul's audience in the Colossian assembly was predominantly non-Jewish. Colossae was originally a Phrygian city, but later Hellenized. It was a major trading center for many centuries prior to Roman expansion, but in the 1st century CE had become secondary to cities like Laodicea. The Phrygians were a subjugated people mentioned all the way back in works such as Homer's Iliad. In the 5th century BCE, when Colossae was at its peak, the people would have largely spoken Phrygian. But Hellenization brought Greek as the dominant language of business. Quote, during the Hellenistic and Roman periods, the use of the Greek language naturally spread in this region. Unquote. Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. There was also a large number of Jews in Phrygia, with it being estimated that in the 1st century CE, as many as 7,500 Jewish freemen were present in the region. Quote, the Jews of this region were known for their laxity in observing their law. Unquote. Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible. The claim by some Messianics that Paul would have written to the Colossians in Hebrew or Aramaic is without historical merit. especially when the Jews of Colossae, widely lax in their observance of the Torah, would not have been really using either. A written Greek origin for Colossians is well assured, given that the only other major linguistic option for Paul would have been a local dialect like Phrygian. The Colossian congregation became a hub of doctrinal problems, all of which necessitated a personal visit from Epaphras to Rome to meet with Paul. The religious background of the Colossians would have been consistent with the standard Greco-Roman pantheon of deities, but there is some evidence of worship to Egyptian deities as well, and the probable presence of mystery cults in the region also begs some questions. This religious diversity likely came from Colossae having been a center of trade, although at the time of the letter, Colossi's influence was waning. It is widely recognized how Colossae was a broad, cosmopolitan place, seeing a mix of many different religious and cultural influences. So, what was the Colossian false teaching then? Some conclude that it was Jewish, some conclude that it was pagan, and others conclude that it was an amalgamation of errors. That the Apostle Paul had to carefully direct his words to the false teaching is something detectable throughout his letter. Because Paul had not encountered the Colossians directly, he had to carefully subvert whatever false ideas were circulating in Colossae. Generally speaking, interpreters today have opted for the Colossian false teaching, involving some kind of mix of a diverse number of influences, ultimately choosing a false teaching which combined elements of paganism and mystery religion with the local Judaism. The evil factors some have suggested that were present in Colossae were, quote, syncretic influences, including ideas from Neo-Pythagoreanism, Iranian and Egyptian influences, and also Jewish mysticism, unquote, from Donald Guthrie's New Testament introduction. While one will likely find materials in Colossians where Gnosticism is suggested as an errant component of the false teaching, this would have to be classified as a proto or incipient Gnosticism, which would later develop into the more developed Gnosticism confronted in the Christian writings of the 2nd and 3rd centuries. Readers see a variety of issues at hand which Paul must address in his letter, all of them critical to place in the context of the Colossian false teaching being subverted. The errant ideas and influences present included asceticism, Colossians 2:18, angel worship, Colossians 2:18, a depreciation of Yeshua's divinity as some kind of intermediary no different than the angels, Colossians 1:15 through 20, 2 and 3, 9, supposed visions, Colossians 2:18, and a reliance on worldly wisdom, Colossians 2:4, 8. The warning about, let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of the angels, taking a stand on visions he has seen, inflated without cause by his fleshly mind. Colossians 2:18, New American Standard, adequately summarizes a good part of the false teaching. As such, Paul urged the Colossians not to be taken captive through philosophy and empty deception, according to the elementary principles of the world, rather than according to Messiah. Colossians 2:8, New American Standard. How things like the Sabbath or the appointed times of the Torah were connected to the false teaching. Colossians 2:16. Is certainly something debated among expositors. While it has been tempting among many to quote these verses by themselves, thinking that the Colossians have been led astray by Jewish errors, one cannot ignore the placement of the Sabbath or appointed times, alongside of self-abasement and asceticism. Understanding the hymn of Colossians 1:15 through 20 is also important for readers, especially for being informed as to the early Christological controversies in the first century body of Messiah. Was Yeshua the Messiah just an exalted figure, perhaps like that of the figure of wisdom seen in much ancient Jewish literature? Or is Yeshua the deity himself, with the hymn employing some subversive language to what had been circulating in Colossae in order to establish the Messiah's supremacy. The meaningless, humanistic philosophy countered in Colossians was surely depreciating the Messiah being the divine Son of God. One of the most direct statements regarding Yeshua's divinity appears in Colossians 2:9, for in him all the fullness of the deity dwells in bodily form, New American Standard, and that is the Greek tes theotetos with the definite article the. In contemporary Christianity, when Colossians is appealed to, it is viewed as a letter to refute how modern believers, quote, are tempted to go along with the philosophy of the times, unquote. From Carson and Moo, their introduction to the New Testament. Alas, though, there is probably not as much appreciation for Colossians among lay readers compared to Bible expositors trying to evaluate the problems and challenges faced by the first century ecclesia. The Epistle to the Colossians has a wide amount of contemporary importance for today's broad Messianic movement, even though our collective engagement with Paul's letter tends to be a bit low. It can be difficult when Messianics encounter statements such as, quote, basically the heresy was Jewish, unquote, F.F. Bruce, International Standard Bible Encyclopedia, although whatever it involved was not a, quote, straightforward form of Judaism, unquote, also from Bruce, ISBE. This involves a little careful historical examination, which many Messianics are not sensitive enough to do in their reading of the letter. Colossians chapter 2 is often a problem chapter for today's Messianic community for a variety of reasons. What does, having canceled out the certificate of debt consisting of decrees against us, which was hostile to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross, Colossians 2:14, New American Standard, really communicate? Was this certificate of debt, keragraphon, the Torah? Was it the record of sin and or the capital penalties of the Torah absorbed by Yeshua's sacrifice? This is probably a place where Messianics need to take a cue from a number of significant post-Reformation Protestant interpretations, which have viewed the certificate of debt as involving the record of sin and the capital punishment of the Torah declared upon lawbreakers, nullified via his sacrifice. The law of Moses and its standard of holiness for God's people being nailed to the cross would not be an appropriate interpretation of Colossians 2:14. One of the most frequently quoted verses from Colossians to any Messianic believer is, "No one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day." Colossians 2:16, New American Standard. Does this mean that these practices are unimportant? What Colossians 2:16 says need not be difficult at all if it is textually recognized that Torah practices like the Sabbath, appointed times, or some kind of kosher eating were caught up together with other ascetic observances. Colossians 2:18 to 23, designed to appeal or even appease the cosmic powers. Colossians 2:15. Inappropriate Sabbath keeping or appointed time observance was caught up in association with some very ungodly activities. Torah practices in general, as a part of the Messianic community's standard lifestyle, were not in view. Being informed as to the different contours of the Colossian false teaching, the larger questions which the Epistle to the Colossians asks today's Messianic movement are quite substantial. Are there any similar errors present in the Messianic community, like those refuted or at least subverted by Colossians? There are surely a number of those within the Messianic world who deride Yeshua the Messiah as the divine Savior, There are those who entertain some kind of mystical or secretive ideas about God, and there are those who are a bit ascetic in their Torah observance. It is easily observed that the Epistle to the Colossians is not a frequently accessed text among Messianic believers read in its entirety. The Epistle to the Colossians has some rather firm, if not damning words, which can be applied to Messianics who give some deal of credence to the views and perspectives of the Jewish mystical tradition, Kabbalah, and their personal spirituality or theology. In the future, having a much fuller appreciation for the message of Colossians is likely to be quite critical for various doctrinal issues being debated. All right, and in the survey of Colossians entry here in the workbook, questions for reflection on Colossians. These are rather big, rather general, the three of them, and then a reflection on the place of Colossians in the Holy Scriptures. So if you're doing this survey yourself, write 2 short paragraphs about what struck you about reading Paul's letter to the Colossians. All right, so I hope you learned a few things about Colossians you didn't know. And as I have said, further on, probably next week, we will discuss the composition of Ephesians, which is locked very closely to that of Colossians. Ephesians most likely being an expanded version of Colossians. All right, so let me switch windows really quickly. There we go. And once again, this has been taken from our ministry publication, A Survey of the Holy Scriptures for the Practical Messianic. All right, so that concludes our theology roundup. Now, we do have some news to get into. Of course, we know that the death of Charlie Kirk has dominated the news feeds. So we got a few other things, mostly about the Middle East, but overwhelmingly it's about Charlie Kirk. Now we do the news roundup after the theology roundup because the news is, of course, time sensitive and it goes day to day. We're reminded, of course, number one, continue to pray for peace, Israel, Gaza, the Middle East. Number two, continue to pray for peace, Russia and Ukraine. And then number three, pray for situations here on the American home front. Of course, we've been monitoring things like the Epstein files, Russiagate. Now we have Charlie Kirk's assassination. What's going on? We've got the fall high holidays impending very, very soon. There are a lot of people anticipating the pre-tribulation rapture. Along with that, we ourselves know that we can just feel tension in the air, and we need greater comfort, greater just solace from the Lord. And we're here as his people to hopefully be able to offer a word of encouragement because we live in a very dark time. All right, so all of the news items that I'm going to go through, even though they're not that extensive, you'll be able to look through these, read, watch, whatever the case may be, later today when this episode is archived at MessianicApologetics.net. All right, we're going to start out with the post I made on X, formerly Twitter, yesterday at 5:19 p.m. As I was sorting through a lot of what took place yesterday. We have entered into a very dark time as a planet and a human species. Since 2020, the Lord has been trying to get the attention of many. Some have heard his cry, others have not. Pray for peace in Israel and the Middle East. Pray for peace between Russia and Ukraine. Pray for sanity to prevail on the American home front. That's, I think, an adequate summary of what we all need to be doing as the people of God. But as you will have noticed, the Lord has been trying to get our attention since 2020. So that's over 5.5 years ago. And I remember very distinctly in Orlando, Florida, going to the IAMCS Rabbis Conference, and the theme, of course, was 2020 vision for 2020. I wear glasses, and very quickly, by mid-February, that's when a lot of the different health issues started to hit, and of course, 2020 was a very dramatic year. How many people all of a sudden forgot that, well, you called on the Lord to give his people 2020 vision, and how many people have not been paying attention? At the same time, how much have we seen regarding changes in society, changes in various matters, and how much of it has just hit us in the core, how much of it has sickened us, how much of it has enraged us at times. But yet, if you're the Messianic community and you invoke upon yourself that you are this end time move of God, welcome to the end times, people. Welcome. All right. Okay, so here is our first story, and this was obviously before I got the news Charlie Kirk had passed away. First news story from Open Source Intel yesterday. Iraqi politician Faiq al-Sheikh Ali, hope I pronounced that properly, on Israel's strike in Qatar. Let's be clear, no country in the region has the power to challenge Israel. All the threats and posturing are empty talk. Condemnation is all anyone can do. Israel's reach is vast, and it has made up its mind to dismantle militant political Islam in the region, and it will succeed. Okay, so here you have someone issuing an opinion, and of course, why is the opinion basically that Israel can't easily be challenged in the Middle East? Is it because Israel's got huge backing from the United States of America? Or is it because Israel is a nuclear power? Or Israel just has, their agents, Mossad everywhere? I mean, all these factors, of course, play in. But it's important to know from an Iraqi politician, Iraq doesn't have relations with the Zionist entity, that, Israel's a major player in the region. We really can't do anything about it other than just issue condemnation. And in his estimation, Israel's going to succeed at taking out militant Islam. But we know this is something which can change on the basis of changing alliances and the involvement of other great powers on earth. Now we're going to change just a moment to something which is off-world, from the New York Post. Yesterday, breaking: one small step for man, one giant step to discovering Martian kind. After years of searching, NASA's Perseverance rover has discovered what may provide the strongest evidence yet of Martian life, per a groundbreaking study published in the journal Nature on Wednesday. Okay, now the subject matter of extraterrestrial life, and when I was at seminary, and I've mentioned this before, we had to deal with a hypothetical, and it wasn't what if a spacecraft lands on the White House lawn and somebody trots out and says, "Take me to your leader." We're not talking about that. And some of y'all may remember the scene in Independence Day where the big giant spacecraft just kind of hovered over Washington. We had to deal more with the hypothetical of a rover going to Mars, other probes going to, let's say, Europa. Is there water under the ice of Europa? What about Titan, one of the moons of moons of Saturn? What if you discover microbes? What if you discover, some kind of algae, something like that? How would that alter believers' concept of God in the universe? We're not necessarily talking about going to Mars and finding, fossils of some kind. These are not easy questions, believe it or not, because many would take that from the perspective of, well, if you've got some kind of amino acids in ice, in water, give it a couple of million years, you can start having very simple single-celled organisms. Give it a couple more eons, and we've got, the process of evolution and all that. And, we don't need God to posit for the creation of life. So this is something which crosses our path from time to time, and we do like to mention it. There are doubtlessly going to be more stories about this kind of subject matter. Okay, from End Time Headlines. And End Time Headlines does promote a pre-tribulation rapture. Here we see there is a growing chorus of people that are claiming that the Lord revealed to them by dreams, visions, or visitations that the rapture will take place on September the 23rd of this month. There is only one big problem with this. So here you see a pre-tribulational organization ditching the idea that the rapture is going to take place on September the 23rd. Now, every year I've been in the Messianic community, there have usually been of course, we get new visitors at your Messianic congregation or synagogue during the fall high holidays anyway, but there's always a special sector of people who are visit because they think that the rapture is going to take place. And what better place to be when the rapture occurs than among Messianic Jews, right? Observing Rosh Hashanah, sounding the shofar. Are you going to have a special group at your congregation this fall high holiday season who's expecting the rapture? Don't be surprised. And what are you going to tell them when it doesn't happen? Okay, we're not going to get that much into the whole Charlie Kirk thing in terms of news because there's an ongoing investigation. It is premature, but this is a post I did think important to pass along. It's from Eyal Yacobi. This is disgusting. Islamicists all over Telegram are celebrating Charlie Kirk being shot. One says, Inshallah, he's dead. This country must address the radicalization crisis. So this is before the announcement that he had passed. People were already rejoicing, and there were many on the liberal left as well who were rejoicing that he had been harmed. We don't rejoice over the harm of any human being. This is just despicable, regardless of how you diagnose it. All right, to the Middle East. We got a couple of stories about Qatar. The first one, open source intel. This is from 1:09 p.m. yesterday. Qatar says it is reviewing its role as a mediator and reconsidering Hamas's presence in the country. Okay, so this is one report. Now we have another one. A little later at 1:41 yesterday, Qatar's prime minister to CNN, there will be a response to the Israeli strike in coordination with regional partners. And open source intel's commentary is FAFO. That is, frack around and find out. Those of you who watched the Battlestar Galactica on Sci-Fi, frack, F-R-A-K, that was their substitute word for our F word. All right, so this is the alert that I saw on Instagram right after I had left HEB yesterday from Newsmax. Turning Point USA co-founder Charlie Kirk has died after being shot at an event in Utah, President Trump says. And for the rest of the day, I went home. Obviously, I had to unload everything from the car. But it took me a couple of hours to sort through everything. I have to admit, I almost threw up. Some of you all, may have had to sit down, pray, catch your breath, take an aspirin. I didn't throw up. I instead had diarrhea. So, but still, I was affected by it physiologically, like many other people have. And, if this were someone on the left, I would be in shock as well. Because we all saw the video. I remember later in the day, Sean Hannity saying, "Look, we're not going to show the video. We're certain most of you have already seen it already, but you don't survive that kind of thing, and it does affect you." And while I didn't see this thing live, I did see the thing within 20, 25 minutes of it occurring. So this is just this is going to be. As people sort through, what does this mean for us as a society, America? it's a watershed event of sorts. It really, really is. And we're all going to be, very reflective over the next few days regarding it. I remember, just like with 9/11, after 9/11, one of the things, people would do, and of course, whenever something bad occurs, you call up a loved one. Hey, are you doing all right? Can I come over and see you? Let me know if anything happens. Let me know if you need anything. I remember after 9/11 that there were millions of people who used this as a prompt to go buy a cell phone, so they can be sure to be able to contact their loved ones in the event of a further crisis. In this case, we already have our smartphones, but I am no doubt that people are going to be much more observant about their surroundings. They're going to be much more careful about where they go in public, who they interact with socially. Messianic Jewish congregations are already on heightened alert with their security, post October the 7th, 2023. How much more are they going to be, careful in terms of security? I mean, these are the kinds of things which do come out of this kind of a tragedy. Okay, Visegrad24 posted this on Instagram. September 2025 is when everything changed, and a broken heart emoji and American flag. Yeah, I mean, a lot of us are going to remember what took place, and we're going to be considering, what the future is. We're going to, just like I remember where I was when 9/11 took place, when the Twin Towers collapsed. My relatives, my older relatives, my parents, they certainly remember where they were when they heard that Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. Many people remember where they were when JFK was assassinated. It's this kind of an event, and it's going to definitely affect us all. All right, two more stories here. This is from Newsmax. This was yesterday evening. President Trump released a message on the assassination of Charlie Kirk, sounding off on provocative rhetoric, which can be linked to political violence. So many of you all have seen this in different forms. So if you haven't, you can watch it there. And then back to the Middle East, because that's, of course, something we pay attention to. From open source intel, this is from 4:16 a.m. this morning, September the 11th. Qatar news agency reports that Doha will host an emergency Arab Islamic summit next Sunday and Monday to address the Israeli attack on Qatar. All right, so just like with all these peace negotiations, all these consultations and meetings, we know this is subject to change, but yeah, what is going to happen about this, we don't know. But we live in a time when everyone's on edge, tensions are high. As God's people, we have a responsibility. Number one, pray for peace, Israel, Gaza, the Middle East. Number two, pray for peace, Russia and Ukraine. And number three, pray for peace here on the American home front with all the things taking place. Pray for peace in the world, because it's only the Prince of Peace himself, Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus the Messiah, who can bring it. And that begins in the hearts and minds of his people and in being transformed by his love, transformed by his Holy Spirit. On behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and support for all of our ministry efforts. If you have not, please visit my website, messianicapologetics.net. There you can access a wide number of free articles, frequently asked questions entries. You can read some of the back issues of Outreach Israel News, among other things. We'll see you again tomorrow with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you. Shalom, and take care.